Welcome, everybody. Appreciate everyone who came out on a cold night. This is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting of January 8th, 2025, and it's 7:04. So let's start as per usual. I will pop up the agenda in a second, do a screen share so everyone who's on Zoom can see it. Just a second here. And before I do that, just to double check, I assume I did a check before, but everybody in Zoom can hear okay?
Yes. Can we just do a roll call?
We're going to in just a second.
Good, thank you.
I'm gonna just read the agenda, and then we were just gonna vote to approve the agenda as a roll call. Okay, so we're gonna start with advisory reports. We'll do previous meeting minutes. And then we have a series of budget reviews. We'll start with Jeremy for an overview, and then collector treasurer, town clerk elections, accountant, advisory committee's own budget, historical commission, veterans, town forest, cemetery, recycling, and transfer station. And then after that's all done, we'll talk about the governance task force letter and that's the plan for tonight. Anybody have any proposed changes to the agenda? So let's then do a roll call, since we have some on Zoom, to approve the agenda as read. And Stephen, let's start with you.
Aye.
Aye.
Nora, aye.
Paul?
Paul, aye. Mike Winters, aye.
Okay, and then on Zoom, Shelley?
Aye.
And Doug?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. So we're 8-0 approving the agenda. Thanks. Okay, so let's start with advisory reports. Let me have the agenda go away. First off, I was just gonna flag, give me just 1 second here, do another screen share. Just gonna flag for everybody a few small changes in the upcoming schedule. So as you can see over on the left, this is the schedule of budget reviews that was in the guidance letter. And just note that as shown in red, town buildings we pulled to January 22nd, and the assessor we put on January 29th. The next time I send around a blast of info to everybody, I'll send the new version of this around, but just wanted to flag that for people, just various schedule things and other things that make those changes sensible. Okay, so couple other things I have, and then we'll see if others have other things to add. Remember, Capital Budget Committee is meeting on January 21st, a Tuesday. Our next meeting is the following Wednesday on the 22nd. No obligation to go to the Capital Budget Committee meeting for advisory members on the 21st, but I think they will be hearing from the regional schools on the turf field track project. And I believe they're also going to be hearing about the museum in the library project. So if any of us want a preview to kind of get a bit of that info before they actually come to us, Peter Moore said we'd be welcome to join that meeting. We'll hear all of that on our own at our own meetings, but if anybody wants to kind of jump in, since those are pretty big asks and projects, big capital projects, thought people might be interested. If people on advisory are planning to go, I'd appreciate knowing ahead of time, because and actually in the next few days, because if people are going to go to that and there are 5 or more of us, I should post it as a meeting so we can participate in the conversation rather than not. So it's a Capital Budget Committee meeting on January 21st.
21st, okay.
Completely optional for advisory members.
Thank you.
I think I mentioned it because I think it might be of interest to kind of get a view into where that conversation is going now, but completely optional because all those folks will be coming to us later on during our budget reviews. I won't go into any particular detail on this, but I'll just mention that Mike Winters and I, as liaisons, met with the Board of Health. Stephen Bonder and I met with the IT folks. And Laura and I met with Deb Seafrain to talk about her parts of the budget. So just the usual kind of liaison, connecting with folks and providing a little bit of early feedback and communication. No big issues that bubbled up that I think we need to get into now, since we'll be getting to reviews of those departments' budgets in the next few weeks. So that's it for me on liaison reports or advisory reports. Who else? What else? Nora, go ahead.
Shelley Silver and I met with the police chief, Zach Ward, for, excuse me, I'm sorry. Fire chief, Zach Ward. And for 2 to 3 hours, actually, had a very interesting, very in-depth tour of both fire houses, the main one and then the one on farm. It was very informative. Shelley, I don't know if you want to say anything.
No, I think it was a good use of our time, understanding the needs of that department, so.
So that's great because there's a lot going on there.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Having the two
there
of
is.
you have the more in-depth perspective will be very helpful when we hear from Zach.
Yep.
Paul, oh, Shelley, go ahead. Was there something else?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Paul.
Laura and I met with Sean Colleen to go over the DPW budget on December 13th. And again, it was kind of a good discussion of that, and we'll see that soon, but
Okay,
that was good.
great, thanks. Anybody else with? Okay. Oh,
I've been trading calls with the inspector, but I have not spoken live with him.
okay, okay.
And
Okay.
I tried to connect on veterans and I contacted Diana Heck, I don't know how she pronounces her last name, and she said she's no longer involved, and then she said, but she's been talking to Jeremy. And I said, okay, I expect Jeremy will fill us in tonight because I got nothing.
I think, yeah, I exchanged emails with her as well, and all signs pointed to you.
And if I can add that for the assessors too, pointing to Jeremy too, so thank you.
Yeah, we're not gonna get to that until,
Exactly,
right,
just,
a couple weeks on.
Mhm.
Okay, so, previous meeting minutes, so minutes from, our December 11th meeting. I had one change to propose relative to the draft I circulated. There was just you can see that there was just a redundant phrase that, I think it was probably a cut and paste that I missed it. I think Penn missed it when we read through them before. So I just proposed to pull that one phrase, but otherwise, any other changes or a motion to
I
accept?
just see a typo on approved previous minutes on the lower third from the bottom of page 2. And
All right,
is
let's-
someone
let's-
taking minutes tonight?
Mike is.
Oh, thank you.
So just tell me where
Where
that
it
is.
says approved previous meeting minutes, bottom of page 2 in bold.
Writing's different than mine. Okay, there we are. Okay. What's the typo, Nora?
Previous.
Previous,
Yes. Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else? Motion to approve as edited on screen?
So
Second.
moved.
second,
Okay, and Mike, we're trying to keep track of, right, okay, great, okay. Let's just do a quick roll call. Let's go in the opposite order this time. Doug,
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, here.
great, good with the minutes?
Yep, good.
Good, thank you. Shelley? I'll take that as a nod, yes. Okay, great. Mike?
Yes.
Paul?
Aye.
Nora?
aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Okay, minutes approved 8-0. Okay, great. So then getting on to budget reviews. In just a minute, I think Jeremy will, sorry, I'm just realizing a quick apology. I put the minutes up to show the changes and I put them up on my screen. I didn't share them. So apologies for nobody else seeing them. But there was nothing complicated going on, so I don't think we need to go back over, I don't think we need to go back over that. But if I do that again, please let me know so that I keep everything on track. All right, so Jeremy, I think in just a minute, will do a budget overview for us. I just wanted to kind of, for new advisory members, just say a minute about sort of what this process is that we're starting on. So Jeremy will give us the big picture on, given budget requests, how it all rolls up, what it implies for tax rate, increase in the tax levy, increases in overall spending. And then our job over the next 6 or 8 weeks is to review each of the budgets that went into that, ask questions, push back if there are places where we think there is spending that maybe isn't necessary, or if there are places where there's spending that something that should be done that isn't in a budget, to take care of that. If there are issues of coordination across budgets, all of those things are things that we want to talk about. We as advisory don't take any votes during these budget review sessions. They are just discussions, conversations, questions that are meant to inform us and to help budget makers think about whether the requests are appropriate or if they should be, adjusted in some way. The time when we take a vote is on March 22nd at our public hearing, when all of us will have to vote either in support of or to change any dollar budget request, because we will be making a recommendation to town meeting on the overall omnibus budget. So that's the day when we all have to, in public, vote and take a stand on the budget, and also on every warrant article, in addition to the operating budget warrant article. So we will, over the next 6 to 8 weeks, right, as everyone saw from the schedule, hear from all of the budget makers, and we'll hear from all of the proponents of warrant articles to inform us so that we can make, smart, make good judgments on March 22nd and, vote our views then. So that's where we're going. We have a set of budgets tonight where I don't think there will be any of the bigger issues, controversies that I think may come up in some of the budgets and warrant articles that we're going to get to a little later in the process. So I think this will be a very good warm up and a chance for us to kind of begin digging into budgets and thinking about the kinds of questions that we want to ask of budget makers, and the kinds of additional information that we might want to back up and rationalize budget requests. So all that said, any questions from advisory members about process before we turn it over to Jeremy to walk us through kind of an overview of how things added up? Okay. Would you like me to share a document?
If you, I can share from here, if that's okay.
Sure. No, that's great. If you can.
So
you
like
may as well be
I
in
did
control.
send around earlier today, a summary presentation that provides the information that was also presented earlier this week in the budget memo and roll-up budget. The roll-up budget is in what I will call an expense and revenue type format, with a section as well that shows you impacts to property taxes, tax levy. And I did send around and certainly pull up the budget model if you want in that expense revenue format, or answer any questions along the way. Please ask questions as you have them. So first wanted to give a little, and to build on what Dan was saying as far as, what advisory's process going forward, up here on the screen and in the presentation is a little summary of what the broader sense of the town government is as far as budget responsibilities. As Sherborn's budget responsibilities are fairly spread out and not centralized. It's the nature of Sherborn's governance in that there is no town charter or official determination by the town of where these responsibilities should sit.
So they are dispersed as a result of just sort of the town government structure becoming what it is over the course of many years, and all defaulting mostly to Mass General Law, where Mass General Law sort of enumerates the select board's responsibilities as the chief elected officials. And there are a handful of budgets that have traditionally been called the select board budget, department budgets, which, similar to your review, the select board will review those budgets during their meetings and offer a recommendation as well to inform the advisory hearing and town meeting. In general, those quote select board budgets are like police, fire, public works, things that don't fall under another board or committee, or the like. However, the select board does not, beyond those departments, they do not have direct budget oversight, nor does the town administrator have direct budget oversight of the various budget makers. There is some color in the town's bylaw as far as the duties and responsibilities of the town administrator, managing the select board office, general supervision of the department heads, establishing effective relationships with town boards, departments, commissions, and committees. It does call out the town administrators are responsible for the maintenance and repair of town buildings, facilities, and property in a general sense. There is in the bylaw, there is some definition of the finance director, town accountant Deb's responsibilities as far as cash flow management, accounting, coordinating financial information, and as well, your duties as an advisory committee is also enumerated in the town bylaw, which is advisory, giving an advice or recommendation to town meeting. In all of that, there is no clear ownership of the town's budget. Other communities that I've worked for have a town charter or something that establishes clear ownership and process for the development of the town budget. And the town budget that's given to town meeting is the town manager's budget. They own the budget by charter. They're responsible to have it developed by, published by a certain date. It must contain certain types of information. It must have a financial forecast. It must have, metrics. It must have what have you. It's prescribed as far as what, whose responsibility is to put the budget together, by when, and what it should contain. Sherborn's bylaws do not have any of that guidance. The only thing that comes close are the town's fiscal guidance policies, which were adopted by the Select Board Advisory Committee, a previous version of the advisory committee, in 2021. Copy of those are on the town's website and were sent around prior to this meeting. In those policies, it does establish or guide to have the town's finance director with town administrator support publish a budget by the end of December. That's about the only thing that we have that clearly gives sort of that roll up as far as whose responsibility it is for a town-wide budget. So what I'm presenting, or what we're rolling up with the help of, all the budget makers, Deb's and her staff's help, myself, is basically enabled by the advisory, your request for us to roll it up for you, not out of a specific responsibility of the town administrator. Moving on, in those fiscal policies, there are some guiding principles that are helpful. A few of the more important ones, I think I just bulleted up here on the screen. So those generally provide guidance on how the town should budget. Again, those fiscal policies were adopted by the select board and the advisory committee, and some previous iterations of those boards, different members on those boards and committees. It was not adopted by either of the school committees. It was not adopted by the Board of Health. It was not adopted by other committees that are budget makers. So those fiscal policies don't have as much teeth as, say, a bylaw or charter. They're governing or guiding the select board and the advisory committee. And we hope others follow lead. This we had, yes,
Regarding that, since you said we could ask questions,
yeah, go for it.
is that all right, Dan?
Oh, yeah, go
Oh,
ahead. Go ahead,
okay.
Nora. That's fine.
So
Go
what
ahead.
other towns, when you said
And
something,
please speak up, everybody, so the microphone picks it up and everybody. can
so my
hear us.
question is, not to go totally off topic, but this is fabulous, thank you. Could you give an example, please, of other towns that have,
Sure, I mean, the towns that I'm
mandatory
familiar
for
with.
schools or Board of Health
I've worked for the town of Framingham, now it's city. I've worked for the town of Natick. I volunteered heavily in the town of Medfield where I live. I'm familiar with their systems. And in both cases, Medfield and Natick and Framingham, they all had charters. They had a town charter that enumerated the structure of their government. A town charter is actually held in a higher regard than your town bylaws. They're sort of a higher level document that are, sort of like, sort of the founding documents for the federal government for the United States. That would be like the charter version for a local government. There is no requirement that all towns in the Commonwealth have charters. However, it is enabled by my Mass General Law. If a town doesn't have a charter, then it defaults to general mass law and various town bylaws that have been developed over the course of years. It's not really a holistic look at how you structure your government. Sherborn's just kind of evolved organically.
and just like, for example, and this is my last question. Other towns say of the similar size, structure, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Lincoln, Carlisle, like, are they?
A number, I think many communities do. If you're really curious, there's an inventory out there of all the towns' form of government and whether they have a charter or not. If I recall, I mean, it was about more than 50% have town charters of all sizes and populations.
In Massachusetts. All right, thank you.
Groton has a charter. So
Thank you.
it's not just a big city, big town thing. It's across the board. It's quite a process to develop a charter. There's a whole charter committee and whatnot.
Is that something you would
Yeah.
recommend?
Well, it's for the town to decide, and a charter committee is something that town meeting would call and organize.
I would.
Maybe
just-
part of the government task force suggestion.
All right, thank you very much.
I was just gonna pick up on that point that, if the town does decide to initiate another governance task force, one of the things they could consider is whether the town should have a charter or, some different structure of government that was a bit more centralized.
Thank you.
Our neighbor to the west, Holliston, recently did some clarifications of their government structure, and they chose to take a path that was short of a charter by way of a home rule petition to the General Court of Massachusetts. So they got some special legislation to help them clarify their government structure. That was the approach they took. So
Thank you.
So it's kind of a lesser step than getting a charter, but clarified a lot of the things that were
Correct.
ambiguous for them, and that they wrote it all down, and presumably we'll get the legislature
Right. They
to
get-
approve it.
well, they're going to be requesting the special legislation so that, the mass general laws that would have
Applies
governed
to
them otherwise, their special legislation would rule over that. And so they would have a self-determination of how they wanted to run their community.
Does that include transition from town administrator to town manager?
Yeah. It could. It doesn't necessarily have to, but it could.
I thought they voted on it.
In Holliston, it did,
Yes.
yes. But a town charter doesn't necessarily mean that that's,
No, I understand, but I'm saying you're talking about Holliston.
Holliston did
That was one.
transition to or are hoping to, with the passage of special legislation, the town manager. Yes. Thanks. Yeah.
Is that to interrupt?
Premature on
Sorry.
your agenda,
Thanks
but-
for your excellent
Um,
presentation.
Thank you. The presentation is amazing. Thank you.
So as far as the budget roll up, so we Deb received, well, she sent out, prepared and sent out all of the budget spreadsheets to all of the budget makers. And then they were received back. And then Deb and I sat and met with most, if not all, the budget makers over the month of December to get some more information about them so that we could understand what they were submitting. And then we took all of those budgets and rolled them up into one summary so you can see how that would impact how it all rolled together. Here's what it looks like from an expense standpoint. You know, your town budget generally has three big sections or three big categories. You've got education, you've got general town government, and then you have undistributed expenses. That those undistributed expenses apply to both the school side and the town side. And they're things like debt service, health insurance, retirement that are not, the town has chosen not to allocate those by expense department, but have them rolled up into one budget. What was received from the local school committee, the elementary school, was a request for an additional $200,000 in their budget or a 2.79% increase. That's their version 1 budget. They will, in the coming weeks, discuss and publish a version 2. Similar, the regional school budget was published as version 1 with a 2.43% increase. That dollar amount, in that it represents a bigger piece of the pie, was an increase of $324,000. The other components of education are the Tri-County Regional Vocational School and Norfolk Agricultural and Minuteman. Those are all options that students can take and that the town has to necessarily fund. The big change there was for the Tri-County building project that was approved just recently by voters of all the member districts. The first year of the debt service for that new building is reflected in their assessment. That's that additional $49,000. That's the town of Sherborn's assessed debt service for the first year. It may end up being slightly smaller than that, but that's the guidance they're giving us now. They're going out to get the bonds shortly. They think they have a conservative estimate for their interest rate. They hope to do a little bit better. But in a month or two, we'll have a more firm number for their assessment. On the town government side, the various budget makers put forward a roll-up of all the town government municipal departments of a 4.6% or 4.7% increase, dollar amount increase of $389,000. I'll get into a little bit more detail as what's driving that a little bit later in the presentation. On undistributed expenses, the big drivers are the medical, the health insurance. You'll see, we had told you previously that we were told by our carrier to include an estimated 10% rate increase, which we did. However, Deb did a good audit and inventory of all the folks that actually take health insurance. Not all employees do that are qualified to, and built in some comfortable contingency. So we were, even though the premiums estimate is going up 10%, we were able to put forward a budget number that was only 6.2% increase based on some Deb's analysis. Hopefully that will come down a little bit as well when Maya gives us in about a month, they'll give us what a better estimate of what the premium increases will be. Hopefully it's less than 10, and hopefully we can reduce that number a little bit more. The other big one is the Middlesex County retirement. That's an assessment the town pays to the county retirement system annually. That generally runs about 6% increase year over year to help fund the unfunded liabilities in that pension program, so that they reach a fully funded status in a certain number of years. This year, however, there was a one-time COLA adjustment that was approved by member communities. So the assessment is going up 10.5%. This year, again, usually it's about a 6% increase, but this year it's larger. So overall, with all that, this budget, as it sits now, is a 3.73% increase from FY '25. If you recall where we were last year at this time, during this presentation last year at this time, the draft budget roll up, we were at 5.7% increase. So there was a little bit more sharpening of pencils put into the development of this earlier version of the budget, I would say. The budgets, the FY '25 budget that was approved at town meeting was a 3.76% increase. So that was what was approved last year at town meeting. Currently, this draft sits at 3.73. Obviously, to offset the expenses, you need revenue. The main source of revenue for the community, about 90% of your revenue is from the property tax levy. To fund this draft budget, the property tax levy would go up 3.7 or 3.68%. That's pretty similar to what the approved budget was for FY '25. The other sources of revenue that the town has are local receipts. Those are like fees, permit fees, building permit fees, motor vehicle excise taxes, various other fees. That represents maybe about 5% of the budget. Every year, we have to report on that to the Commonwealth, so we know what we actually received for FY '24 at this time. And then we have some estimates of what we'll get for FY '25. We go through and do a sort of a revenue forecast of those local receipts. And that's presented here. This is a number we're comfortable with. You'll see it's actually, it's helping offset some property taxes this year, and that the local receipts that we're forecasting that we would receive in FY '26 would go up 8%. And it's still necessarily conservative, but it's a number that we're comfortable utilizing in this budget roll-up. If it wasn't in local receipts, it would be on your property tax levy.
Could you say a little bit more about I mean, that's great, but that's a big increase, and more generally, the non-property tax revenue, including some of the items not on the table, went up, were predicted, estimated to go up pretty rapidly. Can you say anything more about?
Sure. There's a little bit more in the budget memo summary about that under the local receipts category. Most significantly, there was comfort in using what we've been seeing for the motor vehicle excise tax actuals. That can be sort of driven by a lot of local receipts are driven by the general state of the economy and people spending, rooms and meals taxes, people buying new cars. So it's kind of driven by external factors that we all can't control. But we are in the budget preparation taking a little bit higher estimate than we have in the past for motor vehicle excise taxes. The other big local receipt has been investment income, which has come in over our estimates for the last several years. And that's one that we're hesitant to take all credit for, but we're comfortable to take a bit more credit for that investment income.
Is that expected to go up another chunk, or just to stay at kind of the elevated level that it got to? And
I mean, it depends on investment returns, where the town's funds are sitting, the interest rate that is set by the feds, a number of things. Deb, any more?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really, like, when you look at FY '25, we do that when we're only like 3 months into FY '24. So as you move along, you can see that from the September of '24 to December, it increased by so much more. So it kind of builds on itself. So yeah, I think it's a comfortable projection.
So just to push a little harder, trying to, and maybe this is something to follow up on, whether the 26 number is, a big increase over the 25 number for investment income, or it's more that it's the 20, the recent years numbers have gone up a lot. And the 26 number is remaining up at that higher level. If there's something to follow up on later, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, I mean, we have there's a whole worksheet of the
Okay.
revenue estimate.
So I'd be interested in digging
Follow up
into
on
that, but
that
we
if
can
you wanna
do
dig
that. We can do that later. Yeah,
And
thanks.
I'd be interested in seeing, I mean, the excise tax is still a tax on the citizens, so I'd like to see it broken out too.
I mean, you
yeah.
have all that. It's just, we
Yeah.
didn't plan on, I
All
just
right.
didn't plan on talking
Bring
about
the
that.
detail tonight, but
Okay.
just the summary, happy to provide that.
That'd be great. Thanks. Stephen?
If you're gonna cover this somewhere else, you can defer the answer. So the property tax levy is increasing by 1,145,000, of which 240 of which is the result of new property coming online. So would it be accurate to say that the difference, the 900 some odd thousand, is what the existing taxpayers are being burdened by? That's the general increase?
It's a fair statement. In the detail of the revenue expenditure summary form of the budget, which is in the spreadsheet, there's a section on the property tax impact of this proposed budget.
Meaning like what the average happens.
Meaning what the average tax bill is, what this roll-up would do to the tax rate, potentially, what it would look like for the average tax bill.
Yeah, because I did notice that the average, whatever that is increasing at a faster rate than the growth of the budget.
Yeah, you have to look at the logic within the spreadsheet that shows that various factors that go into that, which you want to look at the Excel spreadsheet, I could go through
We'll
it.
get to it. No.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess building on that a little bit, that question is, because you've alluded to it, the proposition 2.5. So that's what that new growth concept where that comes from. So you hear prop 2.5, proposition 2.5. What is that? That's the Mass General Law that governs municipal budgeting. How does that work? So it sets a levy limit. It's not, and that's where some folks get this confused. Oh, my taxes can't go up more than 2.5% year over year. That's not correct. The tax levy limit cannot go up more than 2.5% each year plus new growth. So the town of Sherborn has been below, your budgets have been below the levy limit for some time now. And you have what's called excess capacity. So your budgets could go up more than 2.5% per year until you hit that levy limit. This is a kind of a brief summary of how you calculate that levy limit. So you start with the prior year's levy limit. You add in that 2.5% increase. Or that's the 747 number. And then you add in an estimate of what new growth might be. And new growth is new revenue. It's building improvements, new buildings. That's not an assessment change. That's actual new construction. And that will set your levy limit. Then you add in if there's any overrides or debt exclusions. In this case, the town of Sherborn has debt exclusions. That's how you have generally funded your larger capital projects. You add in your debt exclusions that are separately voted at town meeting and at the ballot. And then you arrive at your maximum allowable levy. And that's that $32,928,000 number. That is the maximum allowable levy that the town of Sherborn would have for FY26. So you could not levy more than that to fund your budget. The budget roll-up summary I just talked about comes to $32,310,000, which is below that maximum allowable levy. So there's what's called excess levy capacity left over, so that's available for some future year. That in Sherborn's case, we've been tracking that excess levy capacity because that's a number that once it's exhausted, you're at the levy limit. And year over year budgeting is governed by the Prop 2.5 restrictions. So you're at that point, without any excess levy capacity, a year over year increase cannot be more than 2.5% plus new growth. And there are many communities in the Commonwealth that are at the levy limit, so it's not uncommon that communities are at the levy limit. It's nice not to be at the levy limit. Therefore, you can budget for what you think you need, not and just go from there. But that excess levy capacity has been reducing year over year as a result of the budgets that the town has approved. Here's a history of that going back to FY 2019. You can see there was a high point in 2022 where excess levy capacity was at 1.6 million. And then since then, the town has funded budgets that have eroded some of that excess levy capacity. Your budget last year or the current fiscal year FY 25 had an excess levy capacity of $776,000. This draft budget for FY 26 would further reduce the excess levy capacity to 618,000. Last year at this time, the chart had a much steeper slope down because of the draft budget at the time was almost 6% increase, eating into excess levy capacity much more than this draft. So somewhat ray of sunshine. That it's not a steepening slope. It's a little shallower slope. But it's a number to watch.
Can you just go back to the 240? How do you calculate that for new growth?
So new growth is generally calculated with consultation with the chief assessor, the building official, and the finance team. So it's a number we have to put together in our revenue forecast or our planning. We have to put it into the levy calculation we give to the Commonwealth. So we have to have some justification for it, and it's based on what we anticipate. It's looking at building permit trends.
I was going to ask.
Really, I mean, you're looking at, do we think we're going to have the same level of building permits as we had in prior years, more or less?
Is it new construction building permits or
It's
just?
all forms of building permits, so anything that would add value. So adding an addition is new growth. And doing, a renovation that adds value beyond just, a year over year appraised value is new growth. We know what prior year new growth is, so we look at what the trend is. The $240,000 number is on par with what we've seen in prior years. I think FY 24 may have come in at 242,000.
Does it track?
FY 24 was 220.
220.
Does it ever track? Do you ever go, I'm just curious, do you track it in terms of like going?
Sure, yeah, I mean, and we,
Really
last year,
count
we
to
did
that?
do a whole financial indicator analysis that one of those indicators was new growth. We looked at some other comparable communities, their new growth. And there's a difference in Sherborn's new growth compared to other peer communities.
I was just thinking like for 240, like 5 years from now or 3 years from now, is it really gonna be 240 or is it gonna be, was that, do you ever go back to
Grow
like
a little
2020?
bit, but
Does it?
it really depends on what is going to happen. I mean, if Coolidge Crossing, for instance,
Right,
ends up being built, there will be a spike in new growth as a
Mhm.
result of that, right? But that's currently not forecast in the new growth number.
okay, thank you.
We're not we're not comfortable doing that yet. But that would be a big, probably one of the biggest new growth numbers you'd see for a while, right? It's a fairly big project for sure. But the 240 is more based on what we typically have seen for new growth.
It was just in your roll up, the spreadsheet, right? It was 20,000 and 24, 216,000 the year before, and then 22 popped at 620, but the years before that were more in the 200 range, and as Jeremy said, running less than a number of other comparable towns.
Thank you.
Back to the expense side again, just to show, where does the town budget, where is it allocated? This pie chart shows, the entirety of the FY 26 budget and the percentage of what is allocated for what function. About 60% goes to the schools, education, that's local schools, regional schools, and the regional technical schools. About 25% goes to public safety, police, fire, public works, and general town government. And then another quarter approximately goes to that undistributed expenses such as insurance, benefits, debt service, transfers to stabilization, and that sort of thing. A good chunk of that undistributed expenses, a little less than half, you could attribute to the school side of the budget. So that 58% is not all inclusive of the cost of schools. There's actual costs of schools built in and carried in the undistributed expenses, just like it is for the municipal budget as well. A little bit more detail diving into the municipal budgets, not the school budgets. The school committees do have, some budget detail they publish that may have some of this information. But as far as the town budgets, town government, this is the proposed budget or the roll-up budget as it sits right now. The town government budgets would go up 389,000, 264 of that would be in the salaries side or part of the expenses, and 125,000 in the expenses. Generally, salaries account for 70% of the town government budgets. 30% are the expenses. There are a couple larger numbers or larger inclusions in the budget that if you kind of exclude them to get more of an apples to apples look at the budget. For instance, the emergency communications or the regional dispatch, FY 26 will be the first year that we need to pay an assessment. That has not been an expense that we have had to bear previously. It was sort of expenses that we had in the police budget for overtime or dispatchers, but for the last several years, we've been, that regional dispatch has been funded by a state grant, which is being phased out. In FY 26, we'll need to start to pay a share of that. Our share for FY 26 is 81,000. And then if you also take out another sort of have to fund or need to fund, required to fund for the veteran services officer, we had essentially a volunteer doing veteran services work for the town. She was getting a small stipend, and most years she didn't even take it. It was like $500 in your budget. Most years she didn't even accept it. The VA has put out recent requirements as far as how the training requirements and the exam requirements for veteran services officers, and our volunteer no longer qualifies to be a licensed or certified veteran VSO. In that they require VSOs to sit for the test to actually work over 2,000 hours per year doing that. We just don't have that level of work in Sherborn. Nor would it make sense to fund it at 2,000 hours and pay her that. So however, we are obligated to have a veteran services officer provide services to the veterans in Sherborn. So we've looked around at various options, and it looks that a shared veteran services officer with the towns of Walpole and Medfield is our best option. We looked at sharing one with Natick. We looked at joining the Metro West region. Basically, we would share them and have an IMA with these communities, and we'd share the cost of utilizing those services. the partnership with Medfield and Walpole is attractive in that Sherborn's cost is only 13% of the entire cost. We're the smallest, obviously, by far the smallest community of those three. So if we enter that IMA, we would we'd be responsible for 13% of that cost of the VSO services, which is about a $10,000 increase in your budget.
Can you give an example of what some of these services offered are?
Sure, yeah. One, it's state law and federal law that the town has a VSO, but they would provide services as to help advise veterans on how to seek benefits and how to apply for benefits with the VA. How to to best get disabled benefits.
I have it on ChatGPT.
And is there some sort of ledger listing the veterans in town, or is this just something that's available for someone to pick up the phone and call?
It's available for them to pick up and call and off and ask for the services of the VSO. They would need to be a resident of Sherborn,
Right.
but no, there isn't an inventory or listing of all the veterans in town, in that we don't know who is coming and going per se. But if they call and they are indeed veterans, then the veteran services officer can offer assistance.
I'm more getting at, I'm making up the number. If there are 50 veterans in town, how do the 50 veterans know that this service even exists?
Well, that's a big, when we've met with the Walpole actually houses the VSO, and he's a full-time person. He seems very engaged, which was one attractive thing. One of the things we wanted to do, if we do enter this IMA, was to do a lot more outreach to the residents in Sherborn so they know that these services are
Right.
available.
It seems like we should.
Yeah. So that seemed to be one of the first things that he wanted to do. And he had already started a plan for that. The reason Medfield and Walpole want us to join is that they've been looking to add a little bit more support for him, some administrative support. And by Sherborn joining, we're able to help pay for that support, to give him more support, and to essentially keep the assessment for those communities essentially even. Maybe it goes up a little bit, but us joining helps them and helps us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna cut you off on the veterans, but I had a question about the regional dispatch. I know there was some sort of figuring out of what and when. Is the 81,000 for FY 26?
That's what we have a verbal agreement in the interpretation of there's an IMA with the town of Holbrook,
Mhm.
who houses the regional dispatch. And what the source of sort of the discussion is that the IMA was entered, halfway through a fiscal year. So it covers, it's half of the fiscal year. The IMA says that the full cost is phased in at 25%, and then 75%, and then full. So over the course of 3 years. So our interpretation is it's that 25% of 50%, which is the 81. They originally said that we needed for the first year 160, but we've clarified that it's 81. The full cost of the assessment is about $360,000. So in FY 27, the town will need to carry that full cost, which before the town entered into that regional dispatch agreement, there was analysis done that showed that the town had been spending similar to that amount in the police budget on overtime, or had, full-time dispatchers doing that service. So there was a cost benefit analysis done prior to joining. But now we need to budget for the actual assessment. But if you exclude that 81,000 and the 10,000 for veterans, the town government increase is 3.57%, just to give a little more of an apples to apples thought. taking out those two kind of have to do items, just to put the town government budgets in perspective. Let's see. There's a lot more detail in the budget memo, but here's some of the bigger drivers of the town government salaries increases. COLA for non-union employees. There's a fairly decent size request for additional salaries for the fire department. And the library is putting forth for an additional position and additional hours for 2 other positions, which all go into that salary increase. And again, more details in the budget memo and will be provided when the budget makers come and discuss their budgets with you. On the expense side, just discussed the 2 biggest ones for the expense side are the regional dispatch and the veteran services. But also IT has some service improvements, the town clerk as well, and town buildings, as well as the fire department. But as you start discussing these budgets in detail with the budget makers, you'll get more information. And I just have one more. In addition, at town meeting, in addition to the operating budgets, town meeting votes in a broader sense on financial matters as well, to fund things such as the OPEB trust to the other employee other post retirement employee benefits trust, the general stabilization account, the capital stabilization account, and the capital budget. So there's other things that financially that town meeting votes outside of the operating budget. The budget roll-up sheet includes that information as well. So it carries $100,000, which has been the traditional. So it carries essentially funding the OPEB trust, capital general stabilization, and capital stabilization, similar to the prior years. There's $100,000 proposed to be contributed from the operating budget for the OPEB trust. Another $100,000 contributed from free cash to the OPEB trust. The current balance of the OPEB fund is $3.5 million. That's a good number. The town has been making good strides to eliminate that unfunded mandate, not unfunded, that unfunded liability. Maybe it was a mandate when the
Complicated.
rules changed.
Yeah.
Complicated.
And then free cash is being used to fund $50,000 in general stabilization, $100,000 towards the capital stabilization, and free cash is being proposed to be used for the capital budget. The operating budget has no free cash proposed to be used for funding. That's the summary.
I have one other question that others may as well. So the debt service numbers in here, it looks like, tell me if this is correct, does not include an estimate of the capital requests for FY 26.
That's correct. So the debt since all prior capital, and since it's generally been the policy or practice of the community to fund larger capital when it's borrowed by a debt exclusion, there's no implication to your operating budget. It's all debt excluded.
Right.
So there's no budgeting to be had per se. It almost offsets itself. Right. So once we know what the actual debt service on those debt excluded projects are, and it comes at various times of the year, that essentially just offsets itself by way of the levy calculation and the budget line. So that budget line for debt service, the vast majority of that debt service is excluded debt. I mean, only like a very, very small amount from years ago was non-excluded.
So in terms of Prop 2.5 limits, as you said, completely
Kind of a
offsets,
wash.
doesn't matter. In terms of the total town spending and the property tax levy, it would affect those numbers because it's additional,
Yeah.
it would be additional resources that the town is devoting to debt service, even though it doesn't count against
Correct.
Prop 2.5.
Yeah.
So it when those come online.
When those
some
come
of these
online,
numbers
they
could
can
change.
affect the levy and your tax.
And presumably would bring them up because it'd be adding excluded debt service, but adding additional debt service.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. What else from other members of advisory for Jeremy before we get into some of the specific budgets?
I won't pull it up on the screen, but I'll just point to the spreadsheet, the expenditure, revenue roll up. Just want to point out to you where the property tax impact estimates are. The way this is set up, you have that levy limit calculation at the start of that spreadsheet. So that I went through that summary of how you calculate the levy limit. This spreadsheet includes fiscal years FY 22 to the draft FY 26. So you can see prior year numbers. It gives you the levy limit calculations. It shows you, what actual, say, new growth was for FY 22 and prior years and what is estimated for FY 25 and 26. Here you go. So the top part there is the levy limit calculation, which is essential when you're developing a budget. So you can develop a balanced budget, but in municipal finance budgeting, a balanced budget kind of refers back to Prop 2.5 levy limits. The next one down is the property tax rate and property tax impact to this draft budget. It shows the tax rate is calculated, based on the levy, based on what's levied and required or funded at town meeting for expenses, applied to the assessed value of the community, and it drops out what your tax rate is per thousand, and then that's what's applied. So this proposed budget, in summary, increases the property tax levy by 3.7%. That's about as good an estimate as far as how it would affect any individual tax property. It generally would change the average single-family property tax from 18,800 up to 19,640. That there's other things that go into calculating that impact.
Sorry, where is that number on there? Is the average property tax on here?
Yes, right
There it is, the bottom.
right there.
Got it.
And then some of this information, like the assessed value, that's actual, right? That's what, we report to the state every year. That was what, there's a tax classification hearing. All those valuations are set. The impact on the average single family home, that's sort of an assumption or some informed information as far as what the average single family home value is based on some available information. So about 1.2 million average single family home value in Sherborn, and then apply the tax rate to that, you get the actual property tax. Now your tax rate in this calculation, what the FY 26 draft budget would do to your tax rate is highly dependent on the valuations of property. So this going up, your tax rate going up 20 cents in this calculation is assuming a 3% valuation increase in property values. It's likely going to be higher than that, like it was last year. So the tax rate, and I actually put in the spreadsheet, if you put in a similar property valuation increase as it was for the previous fiscal year, the tax rate actually goes down. It's the tax rate, but your actual tax payment would still go up.
Okay.
Just want to point that out.
Great, excellent, thank you. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for putting this together and presenting this. It's super helpful to get the big picture view before we dive into specifics. Okay, great.
Can I just ask one
Sure, of course.
housekeeping question? Jeremy, on the draft revenue and expenditure summary fiscal years, that, the one that you were just talking about. For other revenue, the 22, 23, and 24, those were actuals?
Yes.
Okay. So on the next page, on those headings, are those just, is that just a clerical error that was town meeting approved, that should be actuals?
That's correct. Those are actual as well.
No, those are, budget.
Those are budget?
Those are budget. Because that remained as budget, so because you roll it up into the recap is based off the budget,
So 22, 23, and 24,
our budget numbers,
so the expenditures are budgets,
they are.
but the revenue is actual.
Yes, because the revenue, again, when we do the tax rate is based on actual revenue, but it's based on the budget numbers for that upcoming year.
So
Municipal budgeting is odd.
could you say a little more about why? So I had a similar question to Stevens, if you, just about why the preferred presentation is so budgeted for historical years rather than actuals. It's because to get the tax rate calculation to come out the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we historically, we use that other advisory budget model.
Yeah.
And if you look at that budget
Okay.
model, it will go through the same calculations, but there will be a line item that will say variance from actual to budget, and that is the difference between.
And so the logic being that, say for FY 25, when they calculated the tax rate of $16.58, that was based on the budgeted amount for FY 25, just as for prior years. And on the budget sheets that we're going to look at for the detailed budgets, it's going to show actuals for historical values rather than budgets, so that we can track to what happened to actuals rather than just comparing to budgeted.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
okay, thanks, Deb. Okay. All right. So let's go through some of these budgets. I think some of these will be very quick. There may be others that elicit some questions and discussion. And Pam, let's start just going in order with you as collector treasurer. If you'd like me to share screen with your budget, I can. If you want to share whatever's easiest for you, just let me know.
Sure, if you want to share it, that'd be great.
Okay, give me just a second to find it here. Okay, there it is.
Can you just say the department number?
It's 146, 145, or 146.
Treasurer collector. Yeah, 145, 146, yeah.
Yes.
Pam, take it away. Thanks.
All right. So, just really trying to get into all my budget numbers to find out, where I can cut even more. And I came up with, instead of sending out 4 tax bills, one for every quarter, I'm going to cut it down and I'm just going to send out 2. And it will have 2 remittances on it. A lot of towns do that. And that is what cuts down my printing and postage budget by, that 4,000 or so. I think that's really the only big change that I have. My travel went down because we're not spending an extra night for school because we're not taking the test this year. We did it last year. Our dues went up just because the dues went up for our organization that we belong to. Other than that, I don't typically have a lot of stuff in my budget. Do you guys have any questions?
Well, if you're collecting
Here.
semi-annually instead of quarterly, are we losing, thousands of dollars in interest?
No, we're still going to be collecting quarterly. You're just going to get one bill that will have a remittance. Instead of the one that you just got today said it's due February 1st, you're gonna have two stubs on it. It will say Q3 due February 1st and Q4 due.
Well, okay, so begs the question, why are we doing it twice? Why don't we do it once with 4 stubs?
Because I don't want everybody to kill me all at once. I think if we
What does
if we
that
go
mean?
if we go to 2 and I don't see any issues with it, I'm happy to try to do 1. I don't know any towns that only do 1, and I can't do 1 actually, because I don't know what the 3rd and 4th quarters are going to be when we send out the first bill, because the tax rate's not set yet. The first 2 are preliminary, then the tax rate gets set and the quarterlies are issued.
And just to expand on that, if anyone looked carefully at their bill, as Pam said, the first 2 are estimates, and it's based on the prior year's tax rate applied to valuations. And since the tax rate went down in fiscal 25, it meant that we all slightly paid more in the first couple of quarters than what we ultimately would owe, which meant that in the last 2 quarters, we pay a little bit less than just the total property tax divided by 4. So yeah, that would require having at least 2.
Right.
Sorry, isn't there a moment in the year when we know what the next year's taxes are gonna be?
Well, the tax
Yes.
rate is set in December, and the bills for the 3rd quarter and 4th quarter would go out the end of December.
Well,
that's
tax
kind of
rate
what
set
we
in
do.
December. Why don't we send out 1 bill in January with 4 stubs on it for the next year? I mean,
Because it's a split
that-
year.
So Doug, we're doing this
How
on
it
fiscal
goes.
years, not calendar years. So the fiscal year starts in July. And so December's already halfway through the fiscal year, which is
so
why we
what
don't
you're
know
saying
the-
is halfway through the fiscal year, that's when we tell people what their actual tax is?
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yep.
And that's all
That's the way
about
it's been working for 20 years? I mean, is it?
It's the way
probably for 100
Municipal
years.
financing works in Massachusetts.
Yeah. It's not a Sherborn thing. It's a state thing.
So I'm making up a number. My taxes are $20,000. I get a bill in December. I've already paid something, but maybe not even the right amount. Is it gonna get trued up in December? I don't understand how this works.
Yeah, so on that example, Doug, since the tax rate went down, the estimates for the first 2 quarters are based on the prior year tax rate. So with that $20,000 tax bill, as it turned out, you might have paid, instead of 5,000 in each of those 2 quarters, maybe 5,200 in each of those first 2 quarters. And then the tax rate gets set in December, and then you pay 4,800 in the last 2 quarters. So the year sums
Okay,
up to
so
20,000.
you're saying let's do it, send 2 bills a year to save $4,000 in postage?
And printing, yep.
Printing, yeah, okay,
Hmm.
thank you.
Pam, I was just gonna note the one other thing that, the one other category where there's the change is the salary for the assistant tax collector treasurer. And right, the story with that is that with the combination of the office, that person's responsibilities changed
Correct.
and increased. So there was in addition to the 2.5% COLA, a salary adjustment proposed there.
Yep.
Yeah, and for folks that weren't with us in prior fiscal years, the treasurer and collector's offices were separate budgets and had separate officers overseeing those budgets. Now there was special legislation received for Sherborn to have one individual be the treasurer and collector and have it function under one department. Those 2 budgets are now merged here. And actually it reflects, if from prior operations, a savings of about $40,000 in salary savings. Has already sort of been now, we've taken credit for that.
Yeah.
Other questions for Pam? Doug, Shelley, I can't see you. Anything? Okay, great. Thank you, Pam. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll go on to Jackie, town clerk elections, and would you like me to share the budget?
Yes, please, if you could start with Department 161, Town Clerk, we might as well start with that.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Okay, so
Sorry,
totally,
can we blow this up a little bit so we can see more numbers and less menu?
Second here, let's see if I can do that.
We don't need all the toolbar, right?
Okay, that should be a little bit better. Okay, go ahead, Jackie.
thank you. Okay, so overall, the budget is flat. Where I've taken some of the dollar amounts down were the assistant town clerk. It was traditionally always a 24-hour week. We don't need that many hours. We've cut some efficiencies, and the present assistant town clerk works 20 hours a week unless we have an election or town meeting. So I was able to lower that weekly hours to 21 hours, which gives me an extra 50 hours, 52 hours throughout the year for extra work. So that salary dollar amount came down. The big increase or additional money that came in was for town clerk contractual services, which is primarily due to the new codification project where we have all the bylaws online. We are probably going to have at least 3 zoning bylaws. There could be more, so I need to plan additional dollars for all of that. The April 25 money, or excuse me, the April 25 annual town meeting, none of those bills for the codification project will come in until fiscal year 26 because I have 90 days, well, I have 30 days to get the bylaws to the Attorney General's office, and then they have 90 days to approve them. So the codification or the general code can't be updated until after the Attorney General's office comes back with approving all the bylaws. So that's why the April 25 bylaws will hit in fiscal year 26. So about $5,000 of the contractual services is for the codification project. The other expense that went up was dog licensing, and that is primarily because the post office hit us with an extra 45 cents per envelope because of the dog tag. So it cost us about $1.15 or so to send out all of the dog licenses that come in. But as you can see, I don't know if you guys have access to this, but we bring in around $22,000 in fees from the dog licenses. So hopefully that's not an issue for any of us, for any of you. But it's primarily due to postage and the bulk mailing costs. So that's it for those 3 things. Those are the main issues for the town clerk budget. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Jackie, for the codification things that were done in, I think, the 24 town meeting. I
Yes,
remember those bills showed up in fiscal 25.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Yep,
Yes. So,
okay.
yeah, I have that outlined. So we did some unexpected regulations formatting, which cost us about $630. And then the zoning bylaw change was like $1575. That was the really complicated solar.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Um,
Other questions for Jackie before we flip to elections? Okay, great. Let me switch over.
So it's Department 162.
Yeah, give me just 1 second to get this to. Okay, that should be it.
Okay, so this budget is down quite a bit because we do not have any major elections hitting us in fiscal year 26. The September primary for the governor's race and the November 26 governor's race will hit in fiscal 27. So that the budget will go up again to cover those costs. But right now for fiscal 26, the only thing that we're going to have is the annual town meeting and the annual town election. So the contractual services, which covers the police that I'm required to hire, the memory cards that I need for the election machines and everything else, those costs are going to be a lot less because we'll have less elections. And also meetings and seminars, I've cut the budget down on that. The cost of the seminars is, they've raised the cost of going to the seminars, and I haven't been happy with a lot of the classes, so I've cut the budgets back on the conferences. And that's basically it. There's really no other major changes.
Who's running some of those classes, Jackie?
It's a Massachusetts Town Clerks Association, but a lot of
Okay.
them are repeat classes, and I've taken them all already, so I don't feel the need to go, and it's quite expensive for lunch, and so I'm unless the class is something that I feel that we need to go to, I'm opting not to go to the conferences.
Sounds good. No need to repeat 8th grade or anything like that if
No.
you got it.
Yeah.
Stephen, go ahead.
If this is not appropriate at this time, let me know, okay? I want to go back to the real estate tax bills. I'm sorry. I maybe to think about what the time will be to call people or send second notices because their second payment is late because they lost the voucher. So I'm almost of the opinion that if we don't send them electronically to people, that getting the reminder in the mail will save a lot of time and effort on collection calls because people lost the voucher. Now, and I don't know what the ratio is between banks paying the real estate taxes versus the homeowners paying the taxes, but for the $2,000 or $3,000, I might suggest a reconsideration of saving the printing and postage. Because I think you're going to be chasing people to get paid.
Pam, do you want to?
Sure. We do have a lot of people that pay 1 and 2 together already because they didn't like the going to quarterly billing. So we get people that pay the first 2 together and the 3rd and 4th together. And if you're a bad payer or you're forgetful, we're calling you anyways to remind you that your bills are due. So if it does, I don't know what's going to happen. So if it's a disaster, I'll be coming back next year in my 27 budget saying, it didn't work very well, and go back to it. But, I'll put a flyer in and explain to people why I'm doing it, trying to keep the cost down. And, we'll do a lot of outreach that we're doing this too. We'll put it on the website. I can put it on Nextdoor, and just talking it up that, this is what we're doing now. And a lot of towns do it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Pam, what's been the experience of other towns who've done this?
Towns do it,
And how does it work?
they've stuck with it when they've done it.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some education up front, certainly.
right.
Presumably, there isn't a master list of emails or cell numbers or something to ping people at the appropriate time.
Well, if you've set up for automatic payment, you will get a reminder.
Yeah.
I do have people that are either snowbirds or because of the postal service, once somebody gets burned once from not receiving their tax bill and they have to pay a little bit of interest, they usually ask to go on my email list. So I already have a very long email list of people that I do email bills out to. And
Send
maybe
you an
that,
email now.
So would it make
that?
would it make sense in the flyer that you send around the information to kind of solicit people to get you their emails if they'd like to get email reminders?
I can do that. I mean, I'd rather not because our system right now doesn't allow me just to go and click and, send off the bill. I have to go in, I have to print it out, or I have to save it, and then I have to transfer it from the cloud to my hard drive and then email it. So
So
it is a process.
Pam, I was thinking of something simpler than that, not a reminder that says, hey, Dan Sickle, you owe, $6,000, $6,137, but just,
Yeah.
hey, Dan Sickle, your second property tax bill is due in 30 days.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that anybody who wanted that kind of a reminder, perhaps
As an
could.
email blast as opposed to.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
and we can do that through the town's website too. You get, if you signed up for the red
Right.
alert things, we
So
can do it
that-
that way. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea.
that might be a way of, I mean, I think for most people who probably are not always thinking about, when are bills due, the reminder might just be, oh, yeah, I'll go pull that out of the drawer and, take care of it.
Yep. Yeah, that's it. And we're gonna put like a sticker on the envelope that comes out too, just so that people just don't look at it and, toss it on their shelf too, that, this one's gonna be a little different. So yeah, any of those suggestions that you guys have or that you come up with, just let me know, because I'm happy to implement any of them to get the word out.
Steven, other ideas that
Not
would
at the
be
moment, but I'll
helpful?
work on it.
All right.
Okay, work on it. Let me know.
Counting on you on
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Pen,
Well, one idea would be, in addition to the email blast, at least for this first year, a simple, at the time that, when the second bill is due, a postcard that just goes out to every taxpayer. And again, not with their specific information, but just reminder, second quarter tax bills are due X date. If you need a new sheet, let us know. If you need,
well, the postcard with postage and printing would probably undo a chunk of the savings.
Well, no, I recognize that, and I'm not suggesting it's a permanent thing.
I see.
Just that-
I see.
But maybe we should wait and see how many negligent taxpayers we have.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
when we met with Pam and
Yeah.
talked about this issue, I mean, I had the same sort of reaction of really, this isn't gonna work, but the thing that gave me some comfort is that a good number of other towns have done this and it seems to have worked pretty, there's gonna be an adjustment period, but a good number of other towns have done it and it seems like they got there.
Good,
And then, save $4,000, so why not?
absolutely.
Yep.
What else? Either for Pam since she's back or coming back to Jackie. Okay, thank you, Pam. Thanks, Jackie. Okay, all right. Deb, I think you're up
Any measure to go.
next. Happy to share your budget on
Yeah,
screen if that'd be
yes, please
helpful. Okay,
Yeah, my budget is actually going down quite a bit. A little bit is of efficiency, but a lot of it is because we do, the OPEB audit is biannual, so we do it every other year. So we did it in FY 25 here, so we won't have to do it next year. But we have switched audit firms, so our rates have gone down over the last 3 years. And then the last couple years, we actually paid for internal audits. We had a single audit, but we don't plan to do that in FY 26. So there was a huge savings there. We shifted, some of my numbers around for more year-to-date type averages kind of thing. And the only difference in salaries is I reduced my part-time assistant from 9 hours a week to 8 hours a week. So still a little savings there.
could everybody in Zoom hear Deb okay, just as kind of a check on how the microphone is working?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes.
Okay,
Loud and
okay,
clear.
because
You're fine.
sometimes there's been issues in hybrid meetings of, okay, great. Deb, you're projecting very well, thank
Oh, there
you.
we go.
Great. So questions for Deb? Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. All right. So now the one that's gonna get everybody spun up and frustrated. Give me a second here. Okay. Hold on just a second while I sort it out. Okay. So we as advisory have our own budget, which essentially amounts to two things. It's printing and postage for the material we send out around town meetings. And it's also some funds to hire a clerk to take minutes during our public hearing. Because it's a 7 or 8 hour meeting, taking minutes for that is a pretty big production. And because that's the time when we all are going to be speaking and taking public positions, it would be challenging, I think, for any of us to be simultaneously engaged in the meeting and also be taking minutes. So this is a little awkward because the proposed budget, and these are numbers that I put together, actually don't quite meet advisory guidance. So here's the deal on that. If you look at the top bit on salaries, salary for the clerk just goes up 2.5%, and I think probably for that we'll be able to. The person who did it prior years isn't available, but I think we'll be able to find somebody new and hire somebody at that rate. On the printing and postage for what will be a spring 25 town meeting, I just took the actual numbers from the spring 24 town meeting for printing and postage for the notice and for the report, and just carried those over to fiscal 26. Those numbers for printing and postage were a little higher than the fiscal 25 numbers. So I just loaded those in, and hence we come in a little bit above. I did do some rearranging. So there's a bit of shifting between the printing and the postage just because of what we actually spent last year. So, if this turns out to be a year where the warrant has 100 articles and the advisory report is 60 pages long, we'll run over this budget. But assuming that things are more or less like last year, this is, a reasonable shot. Now you can all get mad at me for not getting guidance. Anyways, just so everybody on the committee knows what we're spending on ourselves.
The reason to get mad, we're essential services by gum.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider not sending the warrant to every household, but sending a postcard saying it is posted on the website?
So that's a great question. And I've heard that from other people. So what do people think? What's the sense of?
No,
I think it's,
no.
I think probably we would have to change, I think, a bylaw, because I believe the bylaw says it gets sent to every household. All right, so Doug, do you want
Everyone
to say
needs
a
to
word
see
and then
it.
we'll pick up other views?
Everyone needs to see the warrant.
All right.
I would have to concur. Should get sent to every
Considering that
household.
you only have 100 people that come to town meeting, and you have how many homes? There's, the majority of people aren't looking at it.
Well, that may
I don't
change. That
necessarily
may
agree with
change.
that. I don't,
I looked at it last year. I'm now involved in town politics because I was.
and all the years that I've lived here, I've looked at it, but I have to admit, I didn't go.
Well, you
into
still
a
have
lot
the
because
opportunity to look at it on the website. I mean, it's more green, obviously, not to send it to so many homes.
I think it's important to have.
I agree. I think people need to have it, even when they're slackers.
You get a $33.5 million budget. We're not going to save a couple $100 on paper to save a few trees. People need to see what's going on in town. It's transparency. It would be an outrage to not send it to every household.
I believe I covered it with essential services by gum.
So here's a different question about our budget, Dan. What if it's in our charter to be able to audit a town department, for example. We're not currently planning to, but if we wanted to hire somebody to do so, or hire an outside resource, how do we get the budget to do that? It might cost 50 grand.
We would have to ask town meeting to put $50,000 towards that. I think it would be hard to do, given that unless there were a specific plan of this is a thing we want to do, to just kind of as a contingency, let's
No,
tax.
I'm not looking for
let's
contingency.
tax-
I'm saying if we in a meeting, nobody read anything into this. I'm making up an example. If we said, hey, we want to audit the town hall, the DPW, the school committee, whatever, because we found something that, we want to delve into, we want to hire a resource to do it. We don't have to wait till April to get approval to do it, do we? Or do we?
Not necessarily.
I mean, Sean Colleen came to us at the last meeting and said, I just, replaced a bunch of equipment in town. Please pay me.
So we certainly could draw on the reserve fund. If we needed $18,000 to do something, we could
Right.
certainly, take that from the reserve fund. I mean, that would be the way to do it mid-year rather than, asking the taxpayers to put up $18,000 as a contingency, because maybe we would do something. I mean, I would note that, I think any budget information we want, spending information we want, I think Jeremy and Deb will provide. I think if there is, a concern about, malfeasance,
Yes.
my guess would be if it is, something that's under the purview of the select board, that they would become aware of that, or we would make them aware of that. And then they would, pursue that, then they would pursue that. And they would have the same issue depending on, how it was paid for, of perhaps needing to have a reserve fund request, or, if it's legal fees, then there's a different set of rules that apply to that.
So let me ask it the question a different way. Do we actually have the ability to do what our charter says we have the ability to do? Because if we don't have the ability to call on money in real time to do something, then we can't do it.
Well,
It
I
sounds
think
like
the
you're saying
reserve
we
fund,
can't.
right. I think the reserve fund is the way that we can draw on resources. If there's something that as a committee, we feel, needs to be pursued, that we think the select board isn't pursuing, isn't, through some other avenue being appropriately investigated, managed, or handled, then yeah, we could, just as we did at our last meeting, vote to, use funds from the reserve fund for that. And the reserve fund is under the control of the advisory committee. So it is the one piece of statutory authority where the committee actually controls something rather than offering advice, which is principally what the committee does.
So in theory, if we said we need to hire some outside resource that's going to cost tens of thousands of dollars, we could allocate the money ourselves from the reserve fund.
We could.
Okay,
Yep.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yep, we could. All right, other comments on the advisory budget? Okay, let's keep going then. We do a switch here. And we're going to do Historical Society. I think Susie, it looks like you're here. Do you want me to share pop your budget up on the screen? It's not complicated, but I can do that if you'd like.
Dan?
Yeah.
Historical Commission.
Historical Commission. Thank you. Thanks, Penn. Yes, Historical Commission. Susie, are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm not sure. I'm Gene Gofield. I'm the treasurer.
Oh, Gene, are you doing this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, give me just a second.
Susie's here. I'm not sure she wants to appear.
Oh, all right. Give me 1 second and I will get your budget on the screen. Okay, should be there. Go ahead, Gene. Sorry, I just got, I got off track there.
No problem. No problem. Thank you. And good evening to everybody. So we have a relatively small budget and approximately half of it is devoted to maintenance of a valuable town asset, the memory statue. And we got a Massachusetts state grant a few years ago, which did some major preservation work on that. And since then, we've been charged by the town to maintain the memory statue. And so each year, about half of our budget is taken up with that. The remainder of our $3,800 budget is continuing what we call our sign program, and that has different facets. The one I want to bring to your attention in light of what the town is doing is the new town campus is a site where we hope to place some historic signs similar to the ones that you've seen at Farm Pond and next to the library. Our goal is to have 4 of them that would kind of summarize the history of the town as somebody meandered from town hall to the pavilion that's going to be there. I assume there would be a kind of a nice path there, and we would have signs. So $2,100 is what we're requesting in the FY25 budget for the second of those. We're working on the first one of those, and this would be for the second one of those. Ultimately, there'd be 4 of them. We're also continuing to pursue state funds for other projects that are related to our work. If you're interested, I can go into more detail on that.
Gene, just to clarify, you said that of the FY26 budget request of 3,850, 2,100 is the signs?
Is the sign, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Questions, comments? Okay. Good. Thank you, Gene. Thanks, Susie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Actually, I do have a question.
Ken, go ahead.
So you're preparing the second sign for an anticipated path? Did I understand that correctly?
That's right. There's going to be anticipated 4 of them. We're working on the first one, and this looking ahead at this fiscal year budget, that would be for the second one.
But currently there's no place to place the second sign. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. It would be, imagine a meandering path from town hall to the site of the new pavilion that's going to be constructed. There would be 4 spaces along that where we would envision having signs. Now, maybe the signs you're thinking of are the entering historic district signs. That's completed.
I just wondered when is the pavilion scheduled to be built?
Yeah, Gene, just to follow up on
Oh, I
that,
see.
my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that, the pavilion is kind of a aspirational thing that would be funded through private donations and probably still some ways off before that might come to fruition, if it does come to fruition.
Yeah. We have to be hopeful, I suppose. I think the other people in town who are working hard to get the funding for the pavilion maybe are a little more optimistic about it happening. So I can't comment on, I don't know the progress, to be honest. The land is there. I mean, if you know about doing anything, there's a nice chunk of land. There is going to be an extension of the town campus, and we're going to be ready to put the signs up.
Does it make sense, if I may ask, to make a sign for a location that is not yet constructed? Seen as putting the cart perhaps a bit before the horse.
Oh, well, we'll be prepared when the site is ready. we'll be prepared. And if something happens where the pavilion's not going to be built for 10 years, I'm sure we can find great spots in town that are alternates for that.
Gene, on the 2100, does the arithmetic work that it's roughly half per each sign, so it's roughly 1,000 per each sign?
No, the sign, because of the sign itself is mounted on a metal structure, which actually is much more expensive than the sign itself. So there are 4 of those. So no, the cost is 2,100.
But I'm just trying to pick up on Penn's point.
Per
Yeah.
sign.
You know, on what's the cost? It sounds like there were 2 signs, so on the cost per sign.
Well, we're going to encumber the money from the previous years, from 24, 25. We'll have money to continue the work on the first one, but this is prospectively looking ahead to doing the second one. We have to come out of next fiscal year's budget just because of the way things play out.
Okay, so again, to pick up on Penn's point, if there were a decision to delay that second sign until some future year, that would be basically the $2,100.
That's correct. But
Yeah, okay.
if that did happen, then in the 27 budget, for example,
It would come back.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
okay.
we wouldn't ask for more money until we would,
Yeah, okay.
But is the first sign made and installed? Where is the first sign in the pipeline?
It hasn't been, the process is we design it and collect materials, and that's what we're doing now. Then it gets sent to we've been had good luck with the vendor Signorama. We hope to be able to work with them to construct the sign, and thanks to Sean, I guess Sean has left, but oh no,
Sean has his hand up.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Thanks
he
to
has-
Sean, we get the town to Public Works is able to install those for us. That saves some money.
Let's let Sean jump in. Sean, go ahead, please.
Hey, thanks. I just wanted to make a comment. The signs aren't really contingent on the pavilion. There's a path that hasn't been constructed yet, which will likely get constructed as part of the campus project that we've been kind of ongoing with, regardless of the pavilion. Because there's a beautiful site next to town hall. Some of us call it the Caustic property. We hope there's going to be a pavilion out there sometime, but people use it often now. So the signs will be along that path, both between kind of in that area between all the campus buildings and then headed into the, the wooded and open lot next door.
Thanks, Sean. You said that much better than I did.
And so that is to say, pavilion or no pavilion, there's still an obvious place for the second sign.
I would say there's plenty of places for historic
okay.
signs, just like they found a place in front of the library. There's plenty of areas for it where it's appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Anybody else other info to get? All right, thank you, Gene, very helpful.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Okay. Rolling on, we're doing a lot of these budgets tonight. What is 8:52? Oh, we're actually doing better than I thought we'd be doing. Okay. So let's do veterans, and let me get that popped up. And Jeremy, I think this one is going to be.
Yep. So a lot of the information we talked about previously, so I won't belabor that. But just to give some context on the cost. So through this intermunicipal agreement, Sherborn would pay 12% of the cost, and it's based on town population. And that cost factors to be an estimate for FY26 of $13,800. So that is the budget change. Basically, there was a budget line on an expense line called Veterans Benefits, that $3,000. That had been a budgeted line for many years. And what that was for was to essentially prepay veterans for some benefits that then get reimbursed from the Commonwealth. We feel we don't need to do that anymore. We don't need to fund that budget line for that small amount of money. The town has the float for that reimbursement. So that some of that 3,000 offset the $13,000 cost. So the net budget increase was the $10,000. Other than that, all the expenses remain the same, in that the town expects to continue to do all the Veterans Day events, the Memorial Day events, and so forth. Now with some additional support. Not all the volunteers that have done that in the past still are going to still do that, but they will now have a veteran services officer professional that will help assist them as well.
How many hours a week? Is that like a billable hour per week, or is that just a contract and we just
Just a
don't?
contract, so we would pay, the IMA would be, we would be paying an assessment based on our population, which comes out to be 13% of the overall cost of.
So how does that?
How does it work? Yeah, every year we would get a budget, and we would see, and they've done that for FY 25 and 26, where they have the salary costs, they have the benefit costs, and then they go and do the calculation. It's not up on the screen. It's
Oh, okay.
and they go through the calculation to give us the budget estimate, and then we're invoiced on a monthly or quarterly basis for that assessment.
Accounting of like what they did, or?
Yep, that's part of the IMA. They would provide that to us. They provide a budget estimate, and then they also provide the actual.
So it could feasibly go down if there wasn't.
If they hired somebody new at a lower salary rate or something, or they had. Yeah.
I'm just curious what the salary is or what the hourly is.
Sure. The VSO salary is estimated to be for 2026, $78,000 for the VSO.
For how many hours a week?
It's not based on hours. It's based on whoever calls him, he's going to respond to.
I mean, it's meant to be a full-time
It's a
position.
full-time position.
40 hours a week, or how does that work?
I think it's a Walpole hired position. I think they run on a 40-hour per week. Some communities do 37 and a half, some do 35. I believe they're a 40-hour a week. But it's a professional. He may have to put in more than that on occasion. Salary.
That's a bill, like if they only did 5 hours.
It's not a bill based on hours. We don't get a bill based on hours.
Okay, all right, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, it's a bill based on the assessment, budgeted assessment. So we would get our obligation to pay, Sherborn's obligation to pay is $3,800,
Okay,
regardless of the effort he put in.
13,000.
I'm looking at 13, I thought, like I saw 10 approximately, but it's 13,800.
Yes,
So,
Didn't increase it.
so am I, and one
because we offset some of the costs from some expenses. So the budget impact was 10.
Oh, yeah.
another way, perhaps look at, if I understand it correctly, the budget of the VSO office is approximately 100,000. And we have to pay 13% of that, which is where we get the 13,800. So there's.
Correct.
There's the VSO
It's
salary plus and an
Admin
admin.
assistant
plus
plus
benefits,
benefits.
Yeah.
Right.
Expenses. That's the full cost, the VSO office for the 3 communities. Sherborn share is 13% of that.
And do they tell us how many veterans we have in our town? As Doug, like-
Yeah, I mean, he would be, just like he does now, report to the town administrators and provide regular reports on activity. So we would have regular meetings with him. He'd have office presence here in Sherborn when needed. We'd set him up with a space so he can meet with veterans here in town. And he'd provide regular reports, just like, any other department head would
Okay.
on activity.
Two things. One, if there were some shift in population so that, our veteran population went up or went down, would that then be adjusted?
Yeah, it's not based on veteran population, it's based on the overall population. of the-
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I'm,
I see. Okay.
So, yeah, if there
Oh,
was
so-
a shift
so-
there, yeah, the IMA would be adjusted.
So if our
accordingly.
population went up or down relative to those, then that would adjust. Okay.
so can I just, I mean, I know this is 13,000, I'm just trying to understand. So if we were to do our own and say there's only 5, I just was wondering about the analysis. If there's only 5 veterans.
If we were to do our own, we would need to be able to be a certified VSO, we would have to pay them for 2,000 hours per year.
That's what you said, you're right, okay.
And
$1,000 times your hourly rate. And is that a benefit position at that point for
Got it.
2,000
the
hours?
state, and the state's mandating that.
It
It's
is a
not-
mandate,
it's
yeah,
not
you're-
like,
yeah.
it's not like,
Okay, just another mandate. Okay, that's fine.
yeah.
Thank you.
Ben,
Who's attending the meetings and seminars? I just saw the first line item there. If the,
yeah. I would assume that's for the VSO officer if there's
VSO
continued,
officer,
continued
yeah.
training and stuff.
but that, I would assume that would also, but that's a carryover from past years. I would assume that was something we were covering for our volunteer VSO.
Yeah.
And I would assume that the new, they're built into
Oh.
the Walpole.
I see
VSO
what you're
was-
saying. I need to
Oh.
verify that.
Yeah, okay.
If those sort of expenses are in the IMA.
Only $800, but
Yeah, maybe
yeah.
maybe some of this stuff is covered, yeah.
I mean, some like.
I mean, not the events,
But
you
yeah,
know, certainly still need to stay, but I see the point on the meetings and seminars.
There was only one that stuck out as non-local. Or non-specific to town. And perhaps the supplies and materials, but I assume we would need those for some of the maintenance, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Jeremy, I had a question. This is Shelley. Can you please just explain the thing that you said earlier about the veterans benefits? Because it's only showing up on the 25 budget, but I thought it was something that we were doing for previous years, but I only see that one line item. And I know you said that we're not doing that anymore, but was that
Yeah,
only
because
that 1 year?
on this sheet here, what you're seeing is actuals for
Okay.
FY 22 and through 24, and
Oh, yep.
there was actual no spend of that 3,000. It all rolled to free cash.
Okay. Okay.
We don't think we need that budget line, so we've used it as some credit to offset the cost of the VSO IMA.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, so Dave Colleen's been very patient. Not a lot to talk about, but let's get this popped up. Okay. All right. Dave, just walk us through the basics here, and with some new members, some,
Money that's in the account. This is from the sale of firewood that our guys process. It is not tax money. This is money that the town forest guys make every year. And it's been sitting there for a while because we have a list of things that we're going to be doing starting this year. We have 3 parking lots, we have fire roads to maintain, tower roads for Sean to maintain. And so we have a lot of work coming up, starting in the spring. And this will be seed money to do that. We also get grants from DCR. It's kind of in charge of us. So with that, do you have questions?
I think one of the things to note here is this is a revolving fund and does not affect the operating budget. This is not actually part of the operating budget. what your recommendation, advice to town meeting is what the spending limit should be for this revolving fund. And it's proposed to remain the same as prior years, $35,000.
And the reason why it's kind of nice for us to be doing this tonight is, right, if you look back at last year's advisory report for new members, right, there's a list of, I don't know, 8 or 10 revolving funds in town. And we have to make a recommendation on the maximum amount that can be spent from each of those. And as Jeremy and Dave said, doesn't affect the operating budget, but nonetheless, if funds are going to be spent, town meeting has to approve it, which means we have to make a recommendation. So, this is a very good example, Dave's presentation is a very good example of that. And we'll see the rest of them, over the course of the next several weeks. Stephen.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
So even though
Well,
these
I
are not
just-
part of your operating budget, Deb and the finance folks, we do try to set up actual budgets
So
for
it-
their use.
Is the expense run rate for fiscal 26 the 10,000 or the 35,000? When it says to be requested, what does that mean?
So I think my understanding is that 35,000, right, is the maximum amount that can be spent out of the revolving fund. I think Dave's guesstimate is that it'll probably be 10,000 this year, might be more, depending on how many of these projects get going.
Depends on the projects.
Yeah.
A couple of them are road work and parking lots connected with the highway department. So they're kind of in charge of telling me in the group, what they want.
So a revolving account has a source of revenue and an expense. So the dollar amount set at town meeting is not allocating property taxes, it's just setting the upper limit.
I
But-
appreciate that. What I got confused with was to be requested.
We're approving the upper limit.
So it's the upper limit, but it's also governed by the revenue generated. If there's not enough revenue to cover the expenditure limit,
Right.
that's a problem too.
Right.
I mean, you
And-
can't expend what you don't have.
And there's a farm,
Try.
there's a farm pond revolving fund, and a host of others that, generate revenue from fees of one sort or another.
We frown upon going negative on these.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan.
Oh, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, just I apologize because I'm on Zoom. Who is Dave and who was speaking on this topic?
Dave Colleen,
Who's chair of the town forest committee?
Got it. Is he in the room?
He is.
Oh, that explains it. I was looking.
You
for him
can't,
on
you
Zoom.
can't.
Got it. Thank you.
I don't know if the camera is flipping around to get him.
No, it's not. That's all right.
It's the challenge of, I think maybe you can see the back of,
He's in the lower left-hand.
the very back of Dave's head in the lower left corner.
That shiny?
Yeah. It's
Got it. I actually assumed that's who it was because it was the only guy I could tell wasn't speaking.
It's the challenge of hybrid meetings. So I'm glad that you jumped in and asked that. It's always good to do that, to clarify for people on Zoom what's going on in the room here. Anything else?
Sorry, just a minor question. How is the revenue collected? Is it billed by the town? Is it collected by
the
you?
guys that work on the firewood,
Yeah.
they bring checks to Jeannie and hand it to her. Goes into a fund. Firewood fund,
What,
separate account.
The checks come into the select board office.
this is a program, right, for mostly elderly folks get a benefit off, like, can buy this firewood and kind of get it delivered for less than market price. So it's a nice benefit that the town forest committee does to many of the older folks in town.
And is it, the firewood program still in operation?
Yes. It started with Bob Ambos, who's now passed away. And Charlie Williams is now in charge of it, who's 93 years old. And he still gets out there with his son, and he splits wood.
When are they doing that?
Huh?
When are they doing that?
Up on the Tower Road off of Lake Street, we have an area with,
No, when are they doing it? Because I was doing it for a while and then Charlie Williams dropped out because he was.
Yeah, I mean, they.
Health and it kind of got
it
Some
kinda
days,
fell
I mean, I'm
quiet.
not
Yeah,
gonna
it
be out there in
slowed
the
up.
middle of the
Yeah.
summer, but
His son moved in with him
Oh, wow, okay.
and all his work is on Zoom. So it's worked out, for us very well.
And do you know when they're doing that, when
They probably won't go back in until the spring.
Okay.
Sounds like you're possibly volunteering to get involved.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I was going regularly. And
So you
then
guys-
for a while. So, yeah,
It did slow up.
yeah.
Actually, it shut down during COVID.
No, this is post-COVID. This is, previous,
Pre-COVID.
no,
Oh,
post-COVID.
post-COVID. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was doing it fairly recently, and then when Charlie got sick,
Yeah.
it kind of like, it was unclear when we were meeting, and it
He,
just kind of.
he fell is what happened.
Okay,
And
yeah,
it really slowed down because of that. And then some of the guys picked up momentum.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
he got better. It's.
okay,
All right.
I'll look up for that. It was a lot of fun.
Sounds like you guys should talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody wants to volunteer in the spring?
Okay, terrific.
Good. Thank you, Dave, and thank you for
Thank
being
you.
so patient. Appreciate it. For a small cameo, but it was.
I know.
It's a very,
Well,
very,
It's only the fourth time I've done.
it was a very, very nice cameo. All right. Jeremy, I'm guessing this is gonna be you?
oh, what
Thanks
was
again.
I didn't
Thank you.
see Chucky here, I don't think. Are you okay? We can do this another time too, if we should.
Which, yeah, I'm not sure. What? wanna
Maybe we
pull
should
it up?
just
Maybe I
defer
can-
on this one.
Okay.
Rather than, because there are actually some things.
Okay.
All right. If everybody's okay, we'll just defer and do cemeteries, pick cemeteries up a later week, since
Mhm.
I thought Chucky Blaney was here, but apparently she either isn't or dropped off or whatever, so let's, if everybody okay with that, we'll just do cemeteries later?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, then, rolling on. Let's get rid of this, we'll do recycling, and I think Charlie Tyler's here. Give me just a second to get this popped up. Okay, Charlie, you should introduce yourself because I'm not sure everybody here, everybody probably recognizes you, but doesn't know exactly what your role is with recycling. So maybe introduce yourself and then all the numbers are here for you to just walk us through.
Okay, yep, I'm the chair of the recycling committee. I took over for Carol Rubenstein when I didn't step back quickly enough when she retired and left town. So you may see me at the transfer station. I spent a lot of time there doing volunteer work, particularly with regard to the swap shop and other items that happen at the transfer station. So we have a level funded budget, and it's a budget that we maintain. We spend varying amounts on all these different things as time goes on. The tools, maintenance, and equipment is all stuff that we would use at the swap shop or at the transfer station to do recycling for various things. There are things that we do to prepare materials to be recycled and so forth that we do that. The mailing budget is a budget that we use to primarily to contact new residents as they move into town, to give them the information about recycling. And we also give them a container for food waste, and we also give them a container for recycling as well, which comes out of that container budget down below. Promotional supplies are things that the committee decides that they would like to use for the library fair, for instance, and so forth, to promote what we do and to try to increase the recycling rate in town. Our recycling rate right now hovers around 30%, and we'd like to keep growing it if we could. It suffered some during COVID, and we're still trying to recover from that a little bit as well. Subscriptions and memberships, there's a mass recycle organization in the state that is sanctioned by the state, the DEP, who we answer to in terms of recycling. And that we have a membership that we keep going on that. And we also have attendance at their annual conferences and things like that they do, which allows us to interface with recycling coordinators from all over the state, as well as state municipal assistance coordinators and other state DEP representatives to be sure that we're doing what they want us to do from the recycling standpoint and keeping up with what they expect.
Okay, great. Jeremy, go ahead.
Well, I guess I just wanted to add to this, these are all expense lines in the recycling budget here. What you're not seeing in this is any salary lines, which is unfortunately misrepresenting the effort that the recycling committee actually puts forward. In that they are currently, Charlie included, and other of his associates doing things that in most other communities are done by town staff. There's a fair amount of work reviewing invoices, tracking, overseeing some of the operations at the transfer station that they're doing as volunteers.
On a volunteer basis.
However, may not be sustainable. So, recently Charlie and Diane, one of his peers,
Yes,
has approached the select board's office, town administrator's office to talk about how some of those duties may be taken off their shoulders.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to, can you elaborate a little bit on that, Charlie, just while you're here?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, what we're talking about is keeping inventory on what the tonnages that we are recycling as opposed to the tonnages that go for trash, and reporting that to the state DEP, which we do through a program that they sponsor and administer through each town. And in Sherborn, that's always been done by the recycling committee, and the recycling committee chair bears a lot of the burden for that. And Diane Hansen is one of my committee members who has also stepped forward and helped with a lot of the spreadsheet work that's done. We're using a spreadsheet program that was developed by Jack Mulhall. I don't know how many of you remember him or know him, who was on the committee years ago. But so we're operating with that, and it really is, it's sort of a risk for the town for us to be doing that. It was happening because at that time that the recycling committee started taking on this responsibility, there wasn't anyone else in the town to take it on. So we did it, and Carol Rubenstein did it for years. And when I took over the chair, I also took over those things from her as well. And it's probably better for the town to have someone who answers to the town on a salary basis or a wage basis at least to be doing these things, so that there's some accountability that may not disappear tomorrow, like a volunteer could.
So Charlie, just to elaborate on that a little bit. So you had mentioned, tracking, say, the tonnage of recycled materials. So does that include like cans and bottles that get dumped, or is that say the batteries and electronics that are getting recycled, or what else is involved in that?
Yes, and yes. We have electronics recycling that's done by the pound, actually, by the ton that we do. We do recycling of porcelain fixtures that we do, not that much of them, but we track that tonnage as well. We have recycling of tires, okay, that we look at and do that. We also have recycling of electronic equipment, and any number of things. The commingled containers are something that we recycle. The paper is something that we recycle. Scrap metal is something that we recycle, and we keep track of that tonnage as well. So all those things are kept track of. The scrap metal, in fact, and some of the textiles are actually a revenue source for the town somewhat, and that money comes back and goes into, not sure where it goes, into general fund, I guess, or probably should be applied to the transfer station budget.
So I mean, in addition to all the recycling, necessarily you're also helping track solid waste, the composting, and and other items.
Yes.
Essentially all of the materials that go through the transfer station. In that, one of the required reporting items is to help determine what the recycling rate of the town is. It's a required reporting. You can't do that without having the solid waste tonnage as well. So the recycling committee is doing more than just recycling.
I was gonna say everything but the trash bin, but the
They are.
trash dump, but it sounds like it's
As
pretty
far
much
as the
everything.
Counting and
It's everything, okay.
tallying and,
Okay.
there's this portal with Mass DEP that they literally have. That you have like a Sherborn Recycling Committee Gmail address that.
We set up an email account rather than having it go through a personal account. Yeah, at the time that Carol Rubenstein left.
They actually, the volunteer committee has a login with Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to do the annual required tracking.
So it sounds like there's some thinking and work to be done to figure that all out. Okay, that's really
In
helpful.
some ways, the prior budget that, Chucky wasn't here for cemetery, there are some similar
Right,
things.
right. Ken?
Yeah, is that, and maybe also for the cemetery, is there a time frame for when this will be asked for and what size positions these would be?
Well, I mean, it's just been, sort of recently brought up by Charlie and Diane, and, it's a time frame that, they're bringing this forward, not that they're immediately looking to step down from the committee and not do the work, but they're trying to give the town some notice to make a plan.
No, I'm not.
And I think, Charlie, you indicated earlier this week, like a 6-month sort of time frame.
Well, yeah, we would like to get it done sometime this year if we could, but we're not going anywhere as a committee. Although I'm not getting any younger and probably better not for the town to rely on a volunteer who is hanging on like that.
Is this FY26 ask?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, thinking about how we transition.
So it sounds like you're thinking that there'll be kind of a new version of this budget that would,
This or related budget.
or transfer station or something, that there would be some things to be added that aren't currently here that would begin that to reflect that transition.
Right, and exactly. And would like to combine that with support for the cemetery committee and are pushing for them to hold a commission meeting to help discuss that and inform that.
Okay.
Yeah, that may not affect this budget that much. This is our little committee budget that we just use to keep our promotional activities going and signs at the transfer station, that sort of thing that we need to keep up with. If you've been to the transfer station lately, you notice that there are a bunch of signs that really need to be replaced. We'll be doing
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so, right, as Jeremy said, maybe a related budget rather than this one, but okay, so heads up that there's something likely more that's gonna be coming. Okay. Anybody else with
Why isn't this under transfer station?
Question.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
I like asking good questions.
I think-
No, it's a good question. I mean, we've got, there's a transportation budget in Sherborn, there's a recycling budget in Sherborn, and there's a public works budget in Sherborn.
I
Other
get public
communities,
works.
if you want it, fall under public works, but
Okay,
it's just the way it's evolved in Sherborn. It's where we're at right now. We got to think about what we can do to help address the potential, volunteer shortfall, if you will, and make it more sustainable, really. I mean, generally, like a recycling committee in communities are doing the fun stuff. They're doing the marketing, they're doing the outreach, they're doing
right.
events, right? They're not doing the regular, administrative work.
Why isn't that under transfer though? Why?
It's just the way it's been in Sherborn.
I mean, I think it's probably, I would guess
Nobody's made an issue when,
that.
I mean,
it's
not
a
an issue.
quirk-
Nobody's really.
Yeah, well, when I go to the state activities and those organizations and things like that, a lot of people interface with our salaried or wage earning employees from the communities that they represent. So we've been doing a lot of that.
W or transfer, or is it, are most of the towns? under
Generally would be
DPW?
under public works, generally. I
Yes.
mean, sometimes communities have an enterprise fund that runs their sanitation operation, so that's a separate revenue center and expense center. It's sort of like a revolving fund, but it's an enterprise fund, they call it. It's separate from the general fund. We don't have that sort of revenue to consider that here, and so in that there's not much revenue generated. It's your sanitation program is subsidized by the property taxes in Sherborn. There isn't fees charged. operate. So
Charlie might know the history. My guess, Nora, is that it's just a quirk of 40 years ago, 50 years ago, or 30 years ago when this got going. There was some volunteer who started doing this and thought it was important to track stuff, and then the state required that reporting, and it just kind of stuck. And until now, nobody sort of stopped and said, wait, and nobody asked your question of, wait, why is it set up this way?
I mean, it really is when the state started pushing on it years ago, like, yeah, it's sort of like 1980s, 1990, when the state got involved and said, we need to do some recycling, and they started pushing on communities to get this done. And the way that it worked in Sherborn was it was done by volunteers who were concerned about the environment as well, and wanted to get into recycling and try to promote that. And it's inertia.
Yeah.
I would say, it sounds like we've been the beneficiary, we've had free labor that
Yeah.
other towns pay for.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to spoil the surprise, but
it's not much of a surprise,
but I mean, so will we see in another budget
I think there may be some revisions to the public works budget to help with this, but until we got the picture or the piece from cemeteries, it's not, I don't think it's ready.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Good. Charlie, thanks for the presentation. And now that I understand this, I think I can say this for everybody here. Thanks for all of the hours and hours and hours of great work and keeping track of all of these things.
Well, it's a pleasure to do it, but as I said, I think it's in better interest of the town to have more control over it than just having volunteers who may disappear at any moment. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
See you next weekend.
Yep.
Okay. Last one, transfer station budget. Sean, should I go ahead and share the budget numbers?
Please do.
Give me 1 second.
Well, while you're pulling that up, so for those that don't know, this is the budget that covers everything outside of the recycling committee. So everything that goes on in the transfer station, including the contractor run it. For those that don't know, there's no town employees down there. There's volunteers, and then there's a contractor that run the operation. So that's part of this contract. And then obviously all the tipping fees for the solid waste, the recycles, and everything. You don't get to see the revenue here, which comes from the metal recycling and a small amount from some of the others.
Does that revenue land in the general fund, or does it land somewhere else?
No, the general.
Lands in the general fund.
Yeah.
Part of local
Correct.
receipts.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it was much more significant a decade and a half ago. The commingled and the paper used to come in on the plus side, but pre-COVID, when China shut us off, those that were around, Dan, maybe you were here, maybe it was right before that. We went from the red or the black to the red, and saw a significant spike in the costs. We're one of the very, very, very few customers, so to speak, that sends paper. They call it fiber, but it's the paper and cardboard at a net zero. Most towns are commingling it with their cans and bottles. It gets dirty. It's not very good, and it doesn't get a very good market rate, and they're paying for it. Our paper and cardboard are leaving at no charge. So that sounds like we're getting ripped off, but it's a significant savings because the trash goes to the incinerator at $70-something a ton, and the commingled goes to E.L. Harvey at 100. So that's a good benefit. It takes a little bit of work to keep it separate. There's a compactor for everyone that goes through there. There's a compactor that's dedicated to paper and cardboard. And that's why we're able to keep it relatively clean, keep the food waste out of it. which would come with the commingled, the cans and bottles would get it all dirty. So there's not a whole lot of changes. The more significant one, the maintenance of equipment. What happened when we started paying E.L. Harvey is we started also paying for the compactors that are there that they own. So I decided this year we should separate out the cost that we're paying to them to basically rent that equipment. We're not in a position where we want to purchase brand new equipment. So I just shifted that. It was in the recycling line, which isn't really a good place for equipment rental. So it's not an increase. I just shifted it over there. So in the future, if we decide, all right, well, let's either purchase or do something different with that equipment, that ends up in the right place. I think that's the third line down. And then the increase, again, we're holding what looks like a pretty big increase on we call it water testing. That was kind of the historical name for it, but that's the DEP permitting. Every year, there's two different inspections that happen. And part of it is water testing. There's the cap landfill, which every landfill in the state has to be inspected every year. So they inspect the physical aspects of the cap landfill, and then they also do water testing. As everybody knows, PFAS is a big thing right now with drinking water. So the heavy spike last year, and then we're going to carry through this year, is DEP decided, mandated that we start testing the groundwater samples that we take from there's water sampling wells at the landfill all around it. Those samples we need to test for PFAS. It's very expensive to do. It's labor intensive for them to go out and take the samples. And then obviously the laboratory costs for that. So that's what you see in line 9 for water testing. Any other questions?
Yeah, questions for Sean?
So,
Paul,
yes, I
go
have a
ahead.
question. So I was wondering, Sean, what's the line item about the long-term agreement we have with the incinerator in Millbury? Is that disposal or is that recycling?
The
Disposal?
incinerator,
Yeah,
the solid waste that leaves, and maybe we should add that to the description, is disposal. That's all the trash. That's what currently goes to Millbury on a long-term contract.
Okay.
All of our trash goes to the incinerator in Millbury. So that's disposal.
Right.
Everything else, well, not everything else, but
Tipping fees.
And my question on that, and kind of where I'm going with that, I think you told me, Sean, that that's up for renewal in a few years, right? So
yeah,
so one kind of request I have is, we're kind of locked into that number now, right? So I think it would be good to have a summary of all these long-term contracts that the town is bound by, what that contract is, and when the renewal comes up. Because right now, we have no impact on that line, right? So I think there's this would be one, the school collective bargaining kind of agreement. It's kind of another big one, the regional dispatch agreement. So I think it'd be good to sort of see all those long-term contracts and kind of see when they come up, because that's when we have impact in terms of what that actual cost is to the town.
correct. And that one's gonna go into, if not through, fiscal 27. So yeah, there's likely gonna be an impact. We don't know what that is, obviously. That was a 25-year contract.
Yeah, it's likely that this contract is the longest contract the town has. And that solid waste related things are exempt from procurement. And it was also sort of you can imagine when they built the Wheelabrator facility incinerator, they needed a certain amount of tonnage to get there every day to keep the flames lit. So they were adding towns left and right, and then they got their critical mass. But that agreement has been extended a couple of times, but now I don't think they can extend it, quote, anymore. Year over year, the agreement now just adjusts a COLA sort of adjustment, not a COLA, but CPI adjustment. But with a new agreement, it could reset to whatever. Unfortunately, Sherborn is a quite of a small player in that it
That's kind of the other part too.
kind of along for the ride.
Kind of leading those as well. It matters to us. Sean.
This is a great question, in that there has been some, public works directors from some of the little larger communities that have organized some meetings in fits and starts. But there is really no lead. It's
kind of a good
sort
time to
ad hoc.
figure out at
Hey, we
those
need to do
times
something, 'cause
whether the town's okay with incinerating trash. Like, I'm probably okay with it. Sounds reasonable, but I don't know if others in town would want to be aware that we're actually burning
Unfortunately,
trash, right?
in Massachusetts, there's really no other alternative.
Right.
There's no landfills. They're all closing. There's not any more landfills being generated. There's no other option. And it's being incinerated at a waste to energy facility, so it is generating electricity.
I'm more interested in kind of looking at these long-term contracts and sort of giving more visibility into what those are and kind of when they come up. That's the pressure point I think we in the town would have.
Are there many of these incinerator facilities, or is this like,
Is that?
are there many of options with these incinerators?
I think are there 2 in Massachusetts? Incinerators, 2 or 3?
Could you hear that, Sean?
I'm not sure how many. I think there's only one, I think, that's within trucking range.
That, right,
So
There, but you
that's
know,
a
there's
hard
rare-
negotiation.
Sherborn has 0
Yeah.
leverage in the matter. One is such a small amount that they could care less, and
Right.
2, we have to get it there. So it's not
Right.
like there's competitors that we can shop around to.
The leverage we have with other towns, some of the other towns have rail that they might be able to leverage. And of course, they'll now want, they'll actually want our volume to add to their volume. We've had,
If anything, there might be an opportunity here for an IMA with another community to help with this type of work. Not necessarily with the big vendor, but, with Wellesley or Needham that would they partner with us in some way, or could we partner in that with some way?
Sean, may I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Nora.
Okay, operations, can you explain to me operations? Because I just happened to be there just by coincidence today. And I know it's a cold blustery day, but it was trash all around the place. I've never seen it so bad. And then it's spilling onto Route 27. I mean, it all into the fences. It was really, really bad. Is that like who's in charge of that? Is that part of the contract that you have?
there's a couple things that happen. One, pretty significant windy days. That place is like a wind tunnel. So there's times where residents go in and their trash gets, basically blown out of their car. The operations, which is that line item, is the contractor that's responsible for running. So that covers the labor for people to be there, as well as the trash pickup at all the municipal facilities. So that is that. And I did try to address that, but multiple windy days, that's why there's 10-foot fencing there, because that place is like a wind tunnel. The wind comes up over the Cap landfill and just blows right through. So
Are they responsible for picking that?
They are, yes, for the vendor contract, they are.
The vendor's supposed to do that. Who enforces that?
We do.
Somebody needs to manage it. It falls under this budget. Yes.
The wind was blowing so hard today that when the trash was going into the compactors, it was blowing back out and behind the people putting it in.
No, I mean, I was there. I had paper and stuff and I made sure it all
So
stayed
there's
in
effort
there.
to manage contracts, right? So that there, again, just like recycling, there's no labor or salary in this budget. It falls upon right now, essentially just the director of public works and town administration to enforce the contracts and.
So like sending an email to you, Jeremy, right? Like with the pictures.
And, and I appreciate that. And, we reached out to the vendor and they're working on it.
They tried to address it, but you need to keep in mind, if that were to happen multiple times, the vendor's gonna say, well, then close the transfer station. There's a 30-mile-an-hour wind and people are losing the, was it any of your newspapers that flew out of your car? We don't know. That's the, that's
Yeah,
the
I
risk.
just was wondering, it was,
Drive in there.
Yeah, just.
okay,
bring it to our
I'll go
attention.
back
We'll do the
when
best
it's
we
not
can
windy
to
and
address
check it out.
It is covered in the vendor contract.
Yeah.
They do
Yeah.
have some responsibilities to
And
clean
just
the
out of,
fence lines.
okay, all right, so that's good to know. And then I know last year or the year before or something, it changed from 3:30 closing to 3:15 closing. Was that the vendor or the vendor? I just, it closes now at 3:15.
Yeah, well, the problem with that is that people were showing up at 3:30 and taking 20 minutes to sort out all their
Right.
trash
Okay,
before they left. And so the 3:15 gate closing is getting into the transfer station. If you get there by 3:15, you have until 3:30 to leave.
okay.
Okay. All right, so here's one. I don't know, Charlie, if this is for you or for Sean. And it's a little bit of a random question, but it's something I've wondered for a long time. Any concerns about people from other towns showing up and dumping at the transfer station? Is that something that you?
Well, that's why there's supposed to be
Wrong
stickers.
buttons.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have stickers.
So, I mean, I would just offer the observation that
Yes.
when I go to the transfer station, I see a lot of cars, without stickers.
Yeah.
And I assume they're mostly Sherborn residents, but it's hard to tell. I mean, some of the people I know and recognize, and yeah, of course, they're Sherborn residents, but that's why I've wondered.
Dump stickers are free with proof of residency.
Right.
And
Right.
yes,
And you can
the
rest
the
assured, I
vendor
go there
operating
without
the transfer station is supposed to be having some sort of checking.
I mean, I've wondered, given that it's so close to Natick and Natick charges bag fees, I've just always wondered, do people from Natick come and dump? 'Cause-
They try. They do try. And yeah, but it's I have to say about Roy and Father, they're pretty good at recognizing the clientele who come in. And it's
Okay.
easy to tell when somebody from out of town is coming in and trying to slip their stuff in.
Okay, I mean, so it's not so much the monitoring from stickers, since plenty of people don't get stickers, it's more that
Who knows?
they kind of know who's supposed to be there and who's not.
Yeah, and we encourage people to get stickers, every time they come in, but some people do and some people don't. They have to go to the town hall and get it from a separate place and
Yeah.
it can't be issued at the transfer station. That's something that we've talked about in the past as well. I don't know. That's a whole separate can of worms to open up, but if they could be issued at the transfer station, we could say, here,
Right, show us a driver's license
Yeah,
with
sure, yeah,
a Sherborn
right,
address
right.
and,
yeah, but the people have chosen to keep that at town hall for good reasons. So there are two sides to that debate as well.
yeah, okay. All right, well, maybe, I mean, maybe it's a non-issue, but maybe it's something to think about, because I do wonder if folks from Natick are, dodging the bag fees by just hopping across the town line and slipping in when, people maybe are busy and not watching that carefully.
I'm sure it happens occasionally, but it's not wholesale.
Okay, okay,
Like I said, currently those dump stickers are at no cost. And,
right.
Other communities have used that as a.
They charge for the sticker.
And, if it was a source of revenue, then you would want to enforce it to make sure.
Right.
We're still paying for unauthorized
If,
dumping.
to the extent that there is, we're paying the
Yeah.
cost of getting rid of that stuff, yeah. All right, well, something to think about. Okay,
Speaking of bag fees, have we ever explored that or?
What?
Charlie, pay as you throw.
Pay as you throw. The state would love us to pay as you throw, but it's something that comes up occasionally, and that's one of the reasons that we try to work to keep our recycling rate high enough. We actually had an audit from the state a few years ago to decide if we should go pay as you throw, and the state people who came and audited said, yeah, you're actually doing as well as you probably could anyway. So they didn't recommend it at the time, and we're working to try and keep our recycling rate at the point where pay as you throw would not be enough of an improvement to pay for the effort and everything else that goes into pay as you throw.
It's a significant effort there and cost. The bags themselves, the management of that, where if you're not going to see the benefit in an increased recycling rate and reduced tonnage for solid waste, doesn't, and then just the political hassle.
The politics would be, the politics.
But
would
good
be
The mad
interesting.
people.
Where would you buy the bags?
Pen, did you have a question or comment?
No, I was just saying that pickleball was not me.
All right, we'll get to pickleball. Not tonight.
I'm not getting out.
I'm just saying about
Yeah.
Natick using, never mind.
Yeah, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. Okay, okay, I think we're done. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Charlie. Really appreciate you guys sticking around to
Thank
the
you.
end to take us through this. Okay, so I think that's the end of budget reviews. 9:44, our last agenda item, which I actually think will be potentially unexpectedly quick, is governance task force letter. So remember that at our last meeting, we voted to send a letter to the select board asking them to add a warrant article initiating what would be the third town governance task force for all the reasons that we talked about. I have since learned that there is an effort well underway for a citizens petition to direct the select board to do exactly that. So given that, I thought rather than having duplicative efforts where there's a citizens petition where they are proposing language which tracks the language in the warrant article that was used, 5, 6 years ago when there was the last governance task force, and then having a separate effort from us, which I think might kind of complicate and confuse things. Some other reasons why I think there is an advantage to a citizens petition rather than the select board spinning this up on their own. I'm thinking that our letter should wait just a little bit. And as soon as that citizens petition goes to the select board, then we write a letter providing our support for what the citizens petition is doing. And just seemed like that would be a more coherent, kind of organized way of doing that, rather than having two separate efforts and creating some confusion about who's doing it, who's going to write the language of the citizens, who's going to write the language of the warrant article, because the citizens petition, again, is kind of repeating the language that was used 5, 6 years ago. So that effort is moving forward. That effort is going to get the necessary signatures. And so, I wanted to just check in with everybody and make sure that seemed okay to everybody. But my sense was that might be a preferable strategy, and just hold off probably another couple of weeks on our letter and then send a letter, just expressing our support for that effort.
Hey,
Thoughts,
Dan.
comments?
Yeah. What does it take to have a citizens petition? What specifically do you know about who's running it? How many signatures are needed? How many are garnered? What do you know?
Yeah, so you need 10 signatures of, I think, registered voters. I think typically when people do this, they get more than 10 because if somebody, there's some glitch and somebody writes down the wrong address, or their signature is illegible. So I think people typically get somewhat more than that. The people I know who are involved in this are Corey Lincoln, who was on the governance, she was actually chair of the governance task force, the last one. She's also a former town moderator. She's a former chair of advisory. She currently sits on the capital budget committee. And I know also Mary Wolf, who is a former town moderator, former chair of advisory, is also involved in that effort. And I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are on signatures. I know they've talked to a bunch of people, but I don't know how many they've actually gotten. But they're well connected in town, and I have no doubt that they will be able to get the necessary number of signatures. Pen.
So I'm all in favor of your suggestion. And I'm just wondering about the mechanics. So would our letter do anything other than let the selectmen know that it's got advisory support? because it's gonna still, it would go to, as a warrant article, as a citizen petition, the selectmen
Yes.
aren't gonna do any, they're not gonna do a parallel effort.
Right.
So we're just saying, we think this is a good idea.
Yes, and we'd be,
I mean, so if it is submitted as a citizen's petition, one, it needs to get in before the warrant closes. The select board are closing the warrant on the January 23rd at 5 o'clock. So they would need to submit that petition to the town clerk's office with signatures by then. But once it becomes part of the town meeting warrant, it's one of the warrant articles that you as advisory give advice to town meeting on. So you, in your duties, in addition to your letter, you would be voting up or down on your support for any and all citizen petitions.
I guess I would.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that even though it sounds like it may not have an immediate practical effect, I would support our sending a letter to the selectmen at the appropriate time as you were suggesting.
I think it's just a matter of, as Jeremy said, at the public hearing, we'll vote on that. And given the prior conversation, it sounds like as a committee, we're going to support that when it's a warrant article. I think this would just be a matter of kind of signaling that support instead of waiting till March 22nd, signaling that support somewhere around the end of January.
The advantage of having an additional letter and not just your vote is you can add some more context of what you would like to see in it.
Right, which we talked about at our last meeting, and I took careful notes when we did that, so we could include some of that discussion. Paul?
Yeah, we're just wondering whether we know what the citizens petition will include. Like, for example, I think we talked last time around maybe considering the town charter option like we talked about earlier today, and then maybe considering the partway solution that Holliston did. So what if the citizens petition doesn't include the things that we would like?
So I think the language the last time around in the citizens petition was not a specific list of here are things that the commission, that the task force should do. It was much broader and more general, and that, the task force should undertake a comprehensive review of town governance and strengths and weaknesses. They also did they did a survey, a town survey, also on some of these issues with so on. I suspect that I'm not an expert on this, but my sense and from what I've heard from people is that general language probably is appropriate rather than a specific list of 5 things. Our letter could include those things. And I am confident that if there's a governance task force, one of the first things they would do is come around and talk to Jeremy and others in town hall, talk to people on all the relevant boards and committees in town. And that would, I think, really be the time that we would provide input. As advisory, here are the 4 things that we really think you need to do. And by the way, here's the answer that we think you ought to be trying to get to. And I'm thinking that's really the time for the more detailed and focused input. The language, I have a copy of it, but I don't have it right at hand. But it's very general. It's very general language. It's just about the town moderator, she'll appoint a committee that will look into broadly, the governance issues in town.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on that? Okay. I think we're done. If anybody would like to get us end our evening of misery here. Okay, roll call. Stephen.
Aye.
Ken. Nora. Paul.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Doug.
Aye.
Shelley.
Aye.
And I'm I as well. Okay, thanks. It's 8:00.
9:52.
We're still there. And it's 9:52 as we are done. Thank you, everybody.